You do not sabotage a nuclear weapons program. This was gospel in 1943. Every military strategist, every intelligence officer, every commando planner understood this fundamental truth. Once an enemy nation commits to atomic research, once they build the infrastructure, once they guard it with thousands of troops, you cannot stop them with explosives and small arms. The mathematics were brutal. Atomic facilities required massive industrial complexes, heavy concrete, reinforced steel, hydroelectric power plants generating thousands of kilowatts, security details numbering in the hundreds, minefields, searchlights, machine gun nests, guard towers every 50 meters, and most critically, they required location. The Vemork plant in Rendezvous, Norway, sat at the bottom of a gorge 600 feet deep. Vertical cliffs on three sides, a single suspension bridge as the only access point. The Nazis knew what they had, a fortress that nature itself designed. You do not infiltrate such a facility. You do not destroy equipment protected by concrete walls 3 feet thick. You do not escape 200 miles through enemy-occupied mountains in the middle of winter. You certainly do not do all three with 10 men. The British Special Operations Executive understood this. When Winston Churchill ordered them to stop Nazi heavy water production, the key ingredient in a German atomic bomb, the SOE planners calculated the odds. They concluded that a ground insertion was suicide. They sent bombers instead. 34 British aircraft. All failed to find the target through the mountain weather. They tried gliders next. Operation Freshman, November 1942. 34 Royal Engineers, 2 Horsa gliders. Objective: land near Vemork, storm the facility, destroy the heavy water cells. Both gliders crashed in the Norwegian mountains. Some men died on impact. Others broke legs, backs, spines. The Germans found them. None survived. The Gestapo executed the survivors, some by firing squad, some by lethal injection, some methods never officially documented. The British concluded it cannot be done from the air. It cannot be done from the ground. The facility is impregnable. But they were wrong about one thing. They assumed the men capable of this mission hadn't been born yet. They were wrong. Those men existed. They were Norwegian. They were skiers. They knew mountains the way fishermen know tides. Intimately, instinctively, ancestrally. And the Germans dismissed them as ski bums, mountain guides, outdoorsmen, farmers who strapped on wooden planks in winter. February 1943. 10 of these ski bums were about to prove that the impossible is just another word for not yet attempted. His name was Joachim Ronneberg, 23 years old. Born in Ålesund on Norway's western coast, where the mountains meet the sea and winter means you either learn to ski or you don't survive. Ronneberg wasn't just a skier. He was a Langrendsløper, a cross-country racer who could cover 50 kilometers in a day through terrain that would kill most soldiers in an hour. Before the war, he was studying at the Norwegian Military Academy. Quiet, methodical, the kind of young man who read technical manuals for recreation and memorized topographic maps like other men memorized football statistics. April 1940. Germany invaded Norway. The Norwegian army resisted for 62 days. Longer than France would hold out, longer than Poland, longer than anyone expected. But numbers matter. The Wehrmacht deployed 100,000 troops. Norway had 55,000. The math was merciless. King Haakon VII evacuated to London rather than submit. The government in exile continued the war, and young men like Ronneberg made a choice: stay and submit, or escape and fight. Ronneberg chose the fishing boat. 3 nights crossing the North Sea to Scotland. Waves 30 feet high, no radio, no navigation lights, just stars and hope, and the certainty that surrender wasn't an option. He arrived in Britain in 1941. The British Army didn't know what to do with Norwegian refugees at first. They spoke marginal English. They had no equipment. They had no formal military unit. But someone in the Special Operations Executive looked at these men and saw something else. They saw soldiers who could ski 200 kilometers without rest, who could navigate by stars and terrain alone, who could survive in conditions that would incapacitate British commandos in hours, who knew the Norwegian mountains like the back of their calloused hands. The SOE formed them into the Norwegian Independent Company 1, also called Company Linge, after their first commander. They trained them at Special Training School 26 in the Scottish Highlands. Sabotage, silent killing, explosives, resistance operations, everything a commando needed to turn occupied Norway into a nightmare for the Vemork. But Ronneberg and his team weren't training for random sabotage. They were training for something far more important. Let's talk about heavy water. Its scientific name is deuterium oxide, water where the hydrogen atoms carry an extra neutron. It occurs naturally, but only in trace amounts, 1 part per 3,200 in ordinary water. To produce it in useful quantities, you need vast amounts of electricity and specialized equipment. In 1943, heavy water had one military application that mattered: nuclear fission research. German physicists Heisenberg, Hahn, Deibner knew that heavy water could moderate a nuclear chain reaction. It could turn uranium into a weapon, a bomb that could level entire cities, a bomb that could end the war in Hitler's favor. And in all of Europe, only one facility could produce heavy water in industrial quantities: the Vemork hydroelectric plant in Rjukan, Norway. The plant itself was a marvel, built into the side of a cliff, powered by waterfalls cascading 600 feet down the Vestfjord Valley. Before the war, it produced fertilizer, ammonia, and nitrates for Norwegian agriculture. The heavy water was a byproduct sold in small quantities to laboratories. When Germany occupied Norway in 1940, they understood immediately what they'd captured. They expanded production, they stationed guards, they fortified. By 1943, Vemork was producing 120 kilograms of heavy water per month, enough to fuel Germany's atomic research program. British intelligence knew this. They monitored production through Norwegian resistance networks. They watched as barrels of heavy water were shipped to laboratories in Berlin, to Kaiser Wilhelm Institute, to facilities where German physicists worked on uranium reactors. The Allied atomic scientists, Niels Bohr, Robert Oppenheimer, Enrico Fermi, looked at the intelligence reports and calculated timelines. If Germany maintained production at current rates, they could have a working reactor by late 1944, a bomb by 1945 or 46. The Americans were racing to build their own bomb, the Manhattan Project, but they were behind. If Germany achieved fission first, if they demonstrated atomic weapons before the Allies, Churchill understood the stakes. He told the SOE, the heavy water must be destroyed. Whatever it takes. The bombers failed. The gliders failed. 34 men died trying. Now it came down to Ronneberg and 9 other Norwegians. The mission would be planned by one of Norway's most brilliant minds, Leif Tronstad, a chemical engineer and professor who'd worked at Vemork before the war. He knew the plant's layout better than anyone. Every pipe, every valve, every vulnerability. When Germany invaded, Tronstad escaped to Britain and joined the resistance. Now, from his office in London, he would design the operation that others believed impossible. The operational team assembled in Scotland, December 1942. 6 men would parachute into Norway as the assault force, codenamed Gunnerside. They would link up with a 4-man advance team, codenamed Grouse, already hiding in the mountains since October. Together, these 10 men would execute Tronstad's plan. Ronneberg was the youngest, but the SOE and Tronstad made him mission commander. They saw something in him, a calmness under pressure, a methodical mind that analyzed problems like chess positions. His second in command was Knut Haukelid, 29, a former student and mountaineer. The demolition expert was Frederick Kaiser, 33, who'd worked with explosives in Norwegian mining operations before the war. The team's radio operator was Knut Haugland, 26, who would later become one of the Kon-Tiki expedition members. 6 others, all in their 20s and 30s, all expert skiers, all volunteers. They trained for 3 months. The SOE built a scale model of Vemork, designed by Tronstad himself. Exact dimensions, every door, every stairwell, every heavy water cell. The team practiced the raid in darkness until they could navigate the plant blindfolded. They memorized blueprints. They studied photographs taken by Norwegian resistance agents. They learned exactly where the 18 heavy water cells were located. Basement level, electrolysis hall, 9 cells on each side. They learned German phrases, guard responses, how to bluff if confronted. And they learned one critical fact. The plant's night shift was 6 guards, only 6. If the timing was perfect, if the approach was silent, if they moved fast enough, they could be in and out before the Germans even knew they'd been hit. The SOE gave them explosives, 18 kilograms of plastic explosives, specially formulated to burn hot enough to destroy the heavy water cells without causing a massive explosion that might kill Norwegian civilian workers in adjacent rooms. They were given British commando uniforms. If captured, they'd be treated as prisoners of war under the Geneva Convention, rather than executed as spies, and they were given cyanide capsules, just in case. February 16th, 1943, a Halifax bomber departed Scotland. 6 men aboard, the Gunnerside team. Ronneberg sat near the bomb bay doors, feeling the aircraft vibrate, watching his men check their equipment one last time. The British pilot would drop them over the Hardangervidda Plateau, Europe's largest mountain plateau, 100 miles from Vemork. From there, they'd ski south through occupied territory, link up with the 4-man Grouse reconnaissance team that had been hiding in the mountains since October. Then execute Tronstad's plan. The drop zone appeared below. The dispatcher opened the doors. Arctic air screamed into the fuselage. Ronneberg went first, then the others, then the supply containers, skis, weapons, food, explosives, radio equipment. They landed in deep snow under a clear February sky, temperature -20 Celsius, moon half full, visibility excellent. Ronneberg gathered his team. All 6 Gunnerside men accounted for, no injuries, equipment intact. He looked south toward Ryukan, 100 miles away through enemy-occupied mountains. Somewhere out there, 4 men from the Grouse team waited. Together, they would be 10. The Germans called them ski bums. They were about to learn why that was a mistake. The first 72 hours are about survival. Ronneberg's 6-man team skis south across the Hardangervidda. This isn't recreational skiing. This is military movement through terrain that kills unprepared men with casual efficiency. Wind speeds exceed 50 kilometers per hour. Temperatures drop to -30 at night. The plateau is featureless. No trees, no landmarks, just endless white, interrupted occasionally by rocks and frozen lakes. They navigate by compass and dead reckoning, 20 kilometers per day, pulling sleds loaded with 40 kilograms of equipment each. They ski from before dawn until after dark, stopping only to melt snow for water and eat concentrated rations, pemmican, chocolate, dried fish. No fires. German patrols operate throughout the region. Smoke is a death sentence. On the third day, they reach the rendezvous point, a remote cabin where the four-man advance reconnaissance team has been hiding since October. These men, Einar Skinnerland, Jens Anton Poulsen, Klaus Hellberg, and Arne Kjelstrup, have been living in the mountains for 4 months, monitoring German movements, stealing food from remote farms, watching Vemork through binoculars from concealed positions. The reunion is brief, military efficiency, no celebration. They have work to do. Now they are 10. Skinnerland provides the intelligence update. German security at Vemork has increased since the British glider disaster. The garrison now numbers 200 soldiers. Patrols every 2 hours around the perimeter. Additional searchlights installed. Minefield expanded. The single suspension bridge across the gorge is now guarded 24 hours by rotating sentries with orders to shoot first. Ronneberg studies the updated intelligence and makes his first critical decision. They will not use the bridge. The gorge is 600 feet deep. The cliffs are vertical, ice-covered. In February, at night, he decides they'll climb it anyway. The alternative, the bridge, is a guaranteed firefight. Sentries will radio for reinforcements. The entire garrison will deploy. The mission fails. The cliffs offer stealth. Difficulty, yes. Danger, absolutely. But surprise. He explains this to his team. Nobody objects. These are men who climbed Norwegian mountains as children. They understand the calculation. February 27th, 1943. The night selected for the operation. Why this night? The moon phase is ideal, bright enough to navigate, not so bright that they're silhouetted. The weather forecast predicts clear skies, and critically, intelligence indicates a shift change at the plant. The night maintenance crew will be minimal. The 10 men prepare in silence. They wear British commando uniforms but carry no identification. If captured, they want the Germans to assume they're British SOE, not Norwegian resistance. This protects their families back home. They divide into groups. Assault team. Ronneberg, Kaiser, the explosives expert, Stromsheim, Eidland. These 4 will enter the plant, place the charges, destroy the cells. Covering team, Haukelid, and 4 others. They'll secure the perimeter, provide suppressing fire if needed, prevent German reinforcement during the critical minutes. Reconnaissance team, Hellberg and Poulsen. They'll guide the assault team through the security perimeter using knowledge gained from 4 months of observation. 9 p.m. They begin the approach. The temperature is -20 Celsius. The sky is clear. The moon casts blue shadows across the snow. They ski in single file, spacing themselves 5 meters apart. If one man breaks through ice or triggers a mine, the others survive. They reach the edge of the gorge at 11:30 p.m. Ronneberg peers over the edge, 600 feet straight down. The Mana River, at the bottom, looks like a black ribbon against white snow. The Vemork plant sits on the opposite cliff face, 400 meters distant. Windows glow with electric light. He can see the suspension bridge to his right, two guards visible, rifles slung, breath steaming in the cold air. He makes eye contact with Haukelid. No words necessary. They've trained for this moment. The descent begins. They lower themselves over the edge using rope in some places, free climbing in others where the ice is too thick for anchors. The rock is frozen granite, slick with verglass, a thin layer of ice that coats every surface. Finding handholds requires removing gloves, bare fingers on frozen rock. You have perhaps 30 seconds before frostbite begins. Ronneberg goes first. The demolition equipment is strapped to his back. 18 kilograms of plastic explosive, detonators, fuses. If he falls, the mission ends. Hand, foot, hand, foot. Test each hold before committing weight. The darkness below is absolute. If you slip, you fall 600 feet into frozen river rocks. 20 minutes to descend. They reach the bottom. The Mana River is frozen, but the ice is thin. It cracks under their weight, soaking their boots in ankle-deep water. Waterproof Norwegian military boots keep their feet dry, but the cold is immediate. They move quickly across. Now, the ascent. The opposite cliff is steeper. No rope this time. Too much risk of discovery. Pure free climbing. Ronneberg leads again. The plant is directly above them now. They can hear the hum of the hydroelectric generators, a low-frequency vibration that resonates through the rock. Somewhere above, 6 German guards patrol the perimeter, expecting nothing. Hand, foot, hand, foot. Halfway up, Kaiser's handhold breaks. Loose rock. He slides 6 feet before catching himself on an outcrop. The sound is minimal, scraping ice, displaced stones, but in the silence of winter night, it seems catastrophic. They freeze, listening. No alarm, no shouts, no searchlights. They continue. 35 minutes after starting the descent, they reach the top of the opposite cliff. They're inside the security perimeter now. The fence is 50 meters ahead. The guards don't patrol this side. Why would they? Nobody crosses that gorge. They crawl the final approach. Bellies against snow, rifles across elbows, breathing controlled. The fence is 12 feet high, chain link, topped with barbed wire. Beyond it, railroad tracks that transport heavy water barrels. Beyond the tracks, the plant itself, 4 stories of concrete and steel, built into the mountainside. Hellberg, the reconnaissance expert, leads them to a drainage culvert he discovered weeks ago during surveillance. The culvert passes under the fence, designed for runoff water, just large enough for a man to crawl through. Ronneberg enters first. The tunnel is 4 feet in diameter, filled with ice. He pulls himself forward using elbows, 40 feet of crawling. The explosive pack scrapes against concrete. Every sound is amplified. He emerges on the other side. Industrial yard, railroad cars, stacks of wooden barrels marked with German labels. He helps the others through. Kaiser, Stromsheim, Eidland, 4 men, inside the perimeter, undetected, 1 a.m. The plant's night shift has been on duty for 5 hours. Guards tired, attention drifting. This is when humans are most vulnerable. That pre-dawn hour when circadian rhythms betray vigilance. Ronneberg studies the building. The target, basement level, electrolysis hall. The 18 heavy water cells sit in 2 rows. Each cell is a steel cylinder 4 feet high, containing approximately 50 liters of concentrated heavy water. Destroying them means setting explosives to rupture the steel and ignite the contents. But first, entry. They have keys. Norwegian resistance provided exact copies, smuggled out by a sympathetic plant worker. But Ronneberg doesn't know if the Germans changed the locks after the British glider disaster. They approach a side door, basement-level entrance. This door leads directly to the electrolysis hall, bypassing the main facility where Norwegian civilian workers monitor the generators. Ronneberg tries the key. It turns. The door opens. They're inside. The electrolysis hall is a long room, 40 meters deep, filled with the sound of machinery. The heavy water cells line both walls. 9 on the left, 9 on the right. They're connected by pipes and valves to the electrolysis equipment. Temperature in the room, 25 degrees Celsius. The contrast with the outside cold is disorienting. One Norwegian civilian worker is present, an older man monitoring gauges. He looks up, sees 4 men in British commando uniforms carrying weapons, and understands immediately. He raises his hands, says nothing, nods once. Ronneberg respects this. The man is Norwegian. He knows what they're doing. He won't interfere. Kaiser begins placing charges. He works methodically. 18 kilograms of plastic explosive, divided into small charges. Each charge is pressed against a heavy water cell at its seam, the weakest point. Detonator inserted. Fuse cord connected. He's done this in training 100 times. His hands are steady. The fuses are set for 30 seconds. Enough time to evacuate the building, but not enough time for guards to disarm them. While Kaiser works, Ronneberg and the others secure the room. They listen for footsteps, German patrols, any sign they've been detected. Nothing. Kaiser finishes. Charges set. Ready. Ronneberg checks his watch. 1:23 a.m. They've been inside the building for 23 minutes. He makes a decision that will define his legacy. The original plan called for blowing the charges and evacuating through the way they came, the drainage culvert. But that means crawling 60 feet, while German guards converge on the explosion. They'll be trapped in the tunnel, shot like animals. Ronneberg changes the plan. We go out the front door. His team stares at him. The front door leads directly into the yard. Exposed. Visible, but it's fast. And after the explosion, speed matters more than stealth. They nod. Trust him. Kaiser lights the fuse. They run. Out of the electrolysis hall. Through a corridor, up a flight of stairs, to the main entrance. Ronneberg shoves the door open. They sprint into the yard, across the railroad tracks, toward the fence. Behind them, explosion. Not loud. The plastic explosive is designed for directed force, not concussion, but effective. The windows of the electrolysis hall shatter. Smoke pours out. Alarms begin to wail. German guards emerge from the barracks, confused, shouting. Flashlights sweep the yard. Ronneberg and his team are already 50 meters away, climbing the perimeter fence. They don't use the gate, too obvious. They climb straight over, ignoring the barbed wire that tears their uniforms. Haukelid and the covering team, positioned on the cliff edge, see the explosion. They prepare to provide suppressing fire. But the Germans are disorganized. They don't know what happened. Is it sabotage? An industrial accident? How many attackers? Where are they? Ronneberg's team reaches the cliff edge. Behind them, searchlights sweep the compound. German voices shout commands. They descend into darkness. If you find this kind of forgotten history as fascinating as we do, we'd be honored if you'd hit that subscribe button. We believe these stories of courage and audacity deserve to be told. And by subscribing, you help ensure they aren't forgotten. The descent is faster than the ascent. Controlled falling in some sections, rappelling in others. They can hear sirens now. The entire Ryukyu garrison is mobilizing. Over 200 German soldiers will converge on Vemork within minutes, but the saboteurs are already crossing the frozen river. They climb the far cliff, retrieve their skis from where they cached them, and by 2:15 a.m., 90 minutes after entering the compound, they're skiing north across open terrain. Behind them, Vemork burns. The heavy water cells are ruptured. 3,000 liters of heavy water, Germany's entire 6-month production, drains into the facility's sewage system. The electrolysis equipment is destroyed. Months of work gone. But Ronneberg and his team don't know the full extent of their success yet. They're focused on survival. The escape route is 250 miles to neutral Sweden. German units are already deploying to seal the border. Every road, every rail line, every mountain pass will have checkpoints within hours. The team splits. Smaller groups attract less attention. Ronneberg, Kaiser, and 3 others ski northeast towards Sweden. Haukelid leads another group west, then north. The reconnaissance team scatters to prearranged safe houses. Ronneberg's group skis for 18 hours straight. They cover 60 kilometers the first day. They ski through German patrol sectors, past Wehrmacht observation posts, across frozen lakes where tracks in the snow are visible for miles. On the second day, they encounter a German ski patrol, 4 soldiers on a routine sweep. The distance, 800 meters, too far for accurate rifle fire, but close enough for visual identification. Ronneberg makes another split-second decision. Don't engage. Don't run. Ski casually, as if they're Norwegian civilians traveling between villages. The German patrol watches them through binoculars, decides they're not worth investigating, lets them pass. On the third day, they're deep in the mountains again. No food left. They melt snow for water and chew pine bark for calories. Their bodies are burning reserves, muscle tissue, fat stores, but they keep moving. On the 4th day, they cross into Sweden. Swedish border guards intercept them. Exhausted men in tattered British uniforms, frostbitten faces, carrying weapons and demolition equipment. The Swedes understand immediately. They provide food, shelter, medical treatment, and silence. Sweden is neutral, but Swedish intelligence quietly cooperates with Allied operations. March 3, 1943, 6 days after the raid. British intelligence receives confirmation through resistance networks. Vemork heavy water production has been completely halted. The plant is intact, but the cells are destroyed. Repair timeline, 6 to 9 months. All 10 saboteurs survived. 0 casualties, 0 captures. The Germans launch a massive manhunt. Over 3,000 soldiers deployed throughout Telemark and Hardanger. They search every cabin, every farm, every village within 100 kilometers. They interrogate civilians. They offer rewards. They find nothing, because the men they're hunting are already in Sweden, drinking hot coffee and writing their after-action reports. And in London, Leif Tronstad receives word from his radio operator. Mission successful. All 10 men safe. The plan he designed, executed to perfection. What the Germans didn't know, what they wouldn't understand, until after the war, was how completely they'd been defeated. The Vemork raid didn't just delay Germany's atomic program, it effectively ended it. Let's zoom out to Berlin. March 1943. Albert Speer, Minister of Armaments, receives the damage report. He reads it 3 times, hoping he's misunderstood. 3,000 liters of heavy water destroyed. Production capacity eliminated. Estimated repair time, 9 months minimum, assuming no further sabotage. He takes the report to Hitler. Hitler's reaction is volcanic. He demands to know how 10 men penetrated a facility guarded by 200 soldiers, how they destroyed critical infrastructure without firing a shot, how they escaped across 250 miles of occupied territory without capture. The answers humiliate German military command. They climbed cliffs we believed unclimbable. They used keys obtained through resistance networks we couldn't infiltrate. They skied faster than our patrols could pursue. Hitler orders retaliation. 10 Norwegian civilians executed for every saboteur. But the saboteurs are already in Sweden. The reprisals kill innocent people and accomplish nothing except turning more Norwegians against the occupation. More critically, Hitler orders Vemork rebuilt and production resumed. But here's what German command didn't calculate: the psychological impact on workers and guards. The Norwegian plant workers now know resistance is possible. Morale among German troops plummets. If 10 men can penetrate their impregnable facility, what else is possible? Production resumes by November 1943, 8 months after the raid. But it's slow, cautious. German security is paranoid. Efficiency suffers. And then the Americans bomb Vemork, November 16, 1943. 161 B-17 flying fortresses drop 711 bombs. The plant is devastated. Not destroyed. The bombs miss many critical targets, but damaged enough that production becomes untenable. The Germans make a final decision: evacuate the remaining heavy water to Germany, transport it by ferry across Lake Thyn, then by rail to Berlin. The Norwegian resistance learns of this plan. Knut Haukelid, Ronneberg's second-in-command during the Gunnerside raid, is still in Norway, operating underground. He receives orders from London, from Leif Tronstad: stop that shipment. February 19, 1944. The ferry SF Hydro prepares to transport railroad cars carrying barrels of heavy water across Lake Thyn. The lake is 1,300 feet deep. If the ferry sinks, the heavy water is unrecoverable. Haukelid and 2 resistance fighters board the ferry the night before departure. They plant explosives in the bow, timed to detonate when the ferry reaches the deepest part of the lake. The next morning, SF Hydro departs. 53 people aboard: Norwegian civilians, German soldiers, railroad workers, plus the cargo, 15 tons of heavy water, Germany's entire remaining stockpile. The explosives detonate at 10:45 a.m. The bow ruptures. Water floods the forward compartments. The ferry sinks in 4 minutes. 18 people die. 14 Norwegian civilians, 4 German soldiers, 29 survivors, and Germany's atomic program dies with them. The barrels of heavy water sink to the lake bottom, unrecoverable. In 2004, a Norwegian diving team located the wreck. The barrels are still there, 1,300 feet down, their contents dispersed into the lake decades ago. Here's the strategic calculation that matters. In 1943, German physicists Werner Heisenberg and Kurt Diebner were approximately 18 months behind American physicists in atomic research. The Germans had theoretical knowledge. They had uranium. They had the mathematical frameworks. What they didn't have was enough heavy water to build a working reactor. After Gunnerside, they never would. The Americans completed the Manhattan Project in July 1945. They tested the first atomic bomb at Trinity Site, New Mexico. 1 month later, they dropped bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The war ended. Germany never came close. Post-war interrogations of German scientists revealed how devastating the Vemork raids had been. Werner Heisenberg admitted that without adequate heavy water supplies, German reactor experiments stalled in early 1944. They pursued alternative designs using graphite as a moderator, but never achieved a sustained chain reaction. Kurt Diebner's program at Gottow suffered similar failures. They built experimental piles, but without heavy water, they couldn't reach critical mass. The German atomic program collapsed not because of lack of scientific knowledge, but because of lack of one specific material. And that material was destroyed by 10 Norwegian skiers. Think about the strategic implications. If Germany had achieved a working atomic reactor in 1944, if they'd produced even a single atomic bomb by early 1945, the war's end would have looked very different. Berlin surrounded, detonate an atomic weapon, Normandy invasion succeeding, atomic strikes on Allied ports. The geopolitical calculus changes entirely. Instead, Ronneberg and 9 other men, dismissed as ski bums by German intelligence, prevented that future. Guided by the brilliant planning of Leif Tronstad from London, they executed the impossible. The British government recognized this. King George VI awarded Ronneberg the Distinguished Service Order. The United States awarded him the Medal of Freedom with silver palm. Norway gave him the War Cross with sword. But Ronneberg himself rarely spoke about the raid. In interviews decades later, he would deflect praise, insisting he was simply one of 10 men who did what needed to be done. Joachim Ronneberg returned to Norway after the war. He was 25 years old. He'd destroyed Hitler's atomic program, escaped across 250 miles of enemy territory, and helped change the course of human history. And then he went back to school. He completed his degree. He worked in civilian industries, electronics and telecommunications. He married. He had children. He lived a quiet life in the town of Målselv, in northern Norway, far from the spotlight. He rarely gave interviews. When historians found him, when documentary filmmakers tracked him down, he would politely decline most requests. When he did speak, he emphasized the team. 10 men, he'd say. Not one hero, 10. The other survivors followed similar paths. Knut Haukelid, the second in command, became a prominent figure in Norwegian resistance history. He wrote a book about his experiences. He lectured. But even he emphasized the collective effort over individual glory. Frederick Kaiser, the demolition expert whose steady hands placed the charges, returned to civilian life and worked in engineering until his retirement. Knut Haugland, the radio operator, joined Thor Heyerdahl's Kon-Tiki expedition in 1947, crossing the Pacific Ocean on a balsa wood raft. Later, he became director of the Kon-Tiki Museum in Oslo. All 10 saboteurs survived the war. Some lived into their 90s. They attended reunions, quiet gatherings, where old men remembered what they'd done as young men. And in London, then later, back in Norway, Leif Tronstad continued his work. The brilliant engineer who designed the operation returned to Norway after liberation. Tragically, he was killed in a skirmish with German forces in March 1945, just weeks before the war's end. He never saw the full scope of what his plan had accomplished. But his legacy lived on in the men he'd trained, the mission he'd designed, and the atomic catastrophe he'd prevented. In 2007, the British government finally declassified the full details of Operation Gunnerside. The world learned what had been suspected, but never confirmed. 10 Norwegians had stopped Hitler's atomic bomb. Ronneberg was 93 years old by then. He agreed to a few interviews. Documentaries were made. Historians wrote books. The Norwegian government honored the surviving team members at a ceremony in Oslo. Ronneberg was asked, in one of his final interviews, if he was proud of what he'd accomplished. He paused. Then he said this, We did what we had to do. The war demanded it. Norway demanded it. We were young men who knew how to ski, and we used that skill to fight for our country. That's all. That's all. 10 men, 100 miles of occupied territory, 600-foot cliffs climbed in darkness, 0 casualties, 3,000 liters of heavy water destroyed. Germany's atomic program ended. That's all. Joachim Ronneberg died October 21, 2018, at age 99. His funeral was attended by Norwegian royalty, government officials, and the families of his fellow saboteurs. The Prime Minister of Norway delivered a eulogy, stating that Ronneberg and his team had saved countless lives by preventing Nazi atomic weapons. The cliff at Vemork still stands. The plant still operates, though now it produces only hydroelectric power. In 2015, the Norwegian government opened a museum at the site. Visitors can see the electrolysis hall where the charges were placed. They can stand at the cliff edge and look down 600 feet and wonder how anyone climbed that in winter darkness. The museum displays photographs of the 10 saboteurs, young men in their 20s, most of them staring at the camera with the quiet confidence of people who'd already decided they would do whatever necessary, survive or not. Their names deserve to be spoken. Joachim Ronneberg, Knut Haukelid, Fredrik Kaiser, Knut Haugland, Kasper Idland, Hans Storhaug, Birger Stromsheim, Jens Anton Poulsen, Arne Kjellstrup, Klaus Hellberg. Some were in the assault team, some covered the perimeter, some guided through reconnaissance. All were essential. And the man who planned it all from London, whose engineering genius made the impossible possible. Leif Tronstad, killed just weeks before victory, but forever remembered as the architect of one of history's most important sabotage missions. The heavy water at the bottom of Lake Tin remains there, dispersed into the lake's ecosystem, harmless now. The barrels that once contained Germany's atomic hopes lie in darkness, 1,300 feet down, a submerged tomb for a program that never came to be. If this story moved you, please hit that like button. Every click tells the algorithm this piece of history is worth remembering. We're dedicated to rescuing these forgotten stories from the archives. If you want to join us on this mission, please subscribe and turn on notifications. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment with your city or state and tell us if someone in your family served. Today, the Norwegian military still trains commandos in winter warfare. They ski through the same mountains Ronneberg and his team crossed. They learn the same skills, endurance, navigation, survival, and they're taught about Operation Gunnerside as the gold standard, the mission that proved 10 determined men with the right skills can change history. The Germans called them ski bums. They destroyed Hitler's atomic program, escaped across 250 miles of mountains, and lived to become grandfathers who quietly insisted they'd only done their duty. Thank you for ensuring that Joachim Ronneberg, Knut Haukelid, Fredrik Kaiser, Knut Haugland, Kasper Idland, Hans Storhaug, Birger Stromsheim, Jens Anton Poulsen, Arne Kjellstrup, Klaus Hellberg, and their brilliant commander Leif Tronstad do not disappear into silence. They and their impossible mission deserve to be remembered.